I always assumed that living in Seville would be pleasant. My name is Catalina, and at 30, I enjoy my life working as an online marketing specialist from home. The house I live in was a gift from my uncle, a gesture I truly appreciated. It's a nice apartment with high ceilings and light, spacious rooms. I had no idea how soon my shelter would turn into a fight. It all started about a year ago when I was in the middle of a project, painstakingly developing an ad campaign, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before going to answer. To my surprise, there appeared my parents, Marta and Juan. They seemed rather distressed. "Catalina, we need to talk," Marta murmured as she stepped inside, her voice tinged with dread. "Sure, what's going on?" I asked, attempting to assess their emotions. My parents had been having financial problems ever since our old family house started crumbling apart. Renovations were way beyond their budget, and their income couldn't keep up with the escalating costs. Juan gazed around the home, and before long, he commented, "This place is vast. It seems like a waste for you to live here alone. Why don't we move in?" My mind was blown. Wait, what? You can't just decide to move in here without talking to me beforehand. I have my own life and work to consider. Marta added up, "Well, your father and I don't have a place to go. We've already sold our house. This one is excellent for us." I felt my heart fall, but this house was handed to me by Uncle Louis. He told me I may use it as I please. One's face grew scarlet with frustration. "Louis gave you this house. You didn't even ask for it. You took advantage of the situation." "That's not true," I responded. "I simply had a talk with Uncle Louis, and he offered it to me. It wasn't some plot." Despite my protests, my parents had already made up their minds. They planned to move in the very next weekend. Reluctantly, I decided to let them stay, but only because I couldn't just leave them without a place to go. The day they moved in was pandemonium. Boxes were everywhere, and my parents seemed to be in a continual state of unhappiness. They began to condemn my lifestyle instantly. "Catalina, you're already 30. Don't you think it's time to consider settling down and getting married?" Marta asked one evening while we were unpacking. "I'm happy with my work," I said, attempting to retain my cool. "I don't need a husband to validate my choices." "Look at your sister, Isabel," one said. "She's married and works at a company. You could learn something from her." I sighed. Isabel's life isn't flawless either. She's merely a 10th in a dead-end job. I may not have a conventional career, but I'm successful. Marta's eyes narrowed. "At least she's attempting to build a family. You just sit at home and screw around on your computer." Their remarks cut deep, but I attempted to brush them aside. I recognized that their generation didn't really comprehend the nature of remote employment, but their persistent disparaging was terrible. Then things got worse. Isabel, my younger sister, visited in suddenly one day, carrying a suitcase and looking as unkempt as ever. "Catalina, hey, I've come to stay," Isabel announced without preamble. "Wait, what's going on?" I asked, bewildered. "I'm going through a divorce and need a place to crash," she explained. "So I'll be staying here from now on." Before I could say anything, Isabel rushed upstairs and took one of the guest rooms. My irritation was building. Not only was I suddenly sharing my home with my parents, but Isabel's unexpected arrival made things even more tense. The tension in the house rose. Marta and Juan's incessant comparing of me to Isabel was unpleasant. Despite their financial troubles and Isabel's divorce, they treated me as if I were the failure of the family. To cope with the stress, I decided to get a pet. A friend of mine had a Persian cat named Luna that needed a new home. Luna was the prettiest little thing, and I hoped she would bring some solace to my increasingly tumultuous existence. When I took Luna home, my parents and Isabel were first hesitant. "A cat, really?" Isabel asked, looking scornful. "She's a great companion," I said, disregarding the censure in her voice. "Besides, she's my responsibility, not yours." The family's attitude towards Luna softened once they met her. They couldn't resist her soft fur and gentle purring. But the peace was short-lived. One afternoon, while I was busy working, Luna had a little accident on Isabel's clothes. Isabel's rage was explosive. "Catalina, how could you let your cat do this? These were my favorite clothes," she yelled. I tried to explain that Luna was still adjusting to her new home and that accidents happen, but Isabel wasn't having any of it. "This is your fault. Pay for the cleaning or else," she demanded. The confrontation left me shaken. I didn't know what to expect next. The tension in the house was now unbearable. As the days passed, the hostility continued to grow, and it seemed like every action I took was met with criticism. The situation at home was becoming unbearable. It felt like every day brought a new challenge, and I was struggling to keep up. Isabel's anger over Luna's accident only marked the beginning of the tension. One evening, as I was working on a new marketing campaign, Marta barged into my office. "Catalina, we need to talk," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. I looked up from my computer. "What's it about this time?" "It's about Isabel's clothes," Marta began. "She's been complaining nonstop. She's asked for a compensation, and I think it's only fair." I felt a surge of frustration. I've already explained that Luna is still getting used to her new environment. Accidents happen. I'm not responsible for replacing Isabel's clothes. Juan, who had been standing in the doorway, nodded in agreement. "Catalina, you should have been more careful. It's not like we can afford to keep replacing things." I tried to remain calm. I don't have the money for that, and honestly, Isabel should be more understanding. I'm already doing my best to accommodate everyone. Their criticism didn't end there. Isabel, who had overheard our conversation, stormed into the room. "You think you're so superior with your fancy job and your big house," she said. "But this is about respect, Catalina. I'm not asking for much, just a little consideration." My patience was wearing thin. Respect goes both ways, Isabel. I've put up with more than I should have already. Days passed, and the hostility in the house continued to escalate. Every small issue became a major argument. Isabel seemed determined to find fault with everything I did. Even the smallest of mistakes were magnified into huge problems. Then came the turning point that pushed everything over the edge. One night, as I was preparing dinner, I heard Isabel arguing with my parents in the living room. Their voices were raised, and the conversation was quickly turning ugly. Curious and anxious, I walked into the room. "What's going on?" Isabel's face was flushed with anger. "Catalina's cat soiled my clothes again. I've had enough. She needs to get rid of that animal." My heart sank. "Isabel, it was one accident. Luna's still adjusting. Can't you be a little more patient?" Juan jumped in, his voice firm. "Catalina, this isn't just about the clothes. It's about the fact that you've been neglecting us. We're living here too, and you need to take responsibility." The argument grew heated, and before long, Isabel and my parents were demanding that I and Luna leave the house. "We're not comfortable living here with your cat," Isabel said, her eyes blazing. "Either the cat goes, or you do." My shock turned to anger. So now I'm being kicked out of my own home because of a minor issue with Luna. "Yes," Marta said sharply. "The eviction isn't just about Luna. It's about how you've treated us. You've been ungrateful and inconsiderate." I was devastated. The house that had once been my sanctuary was now the source of my misery. I knew I had to make a decision. The idea of letting my family dictate my life was unacceptable. I had been pushed too far. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let my family's entitlement and disrespect drive me out of my home. I needed to reclaim my independence. I decided to contact Uncle Louis. I dialed his number and waited for him to pick up. "Catalina, how are you?" Uncle Louis's voice was warm but tired. "Hi, Uncle Louis," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need your help. I want to discuss the house." There was a pause on the other end. "What's the matter?" I took a deep breath and explained the situation. My parents and my sister have moved in, and things have become really difficult. They've now demanded that Luna and I leave. I don't know what to do." "I'm sorry to hear that," Uncle Louis said sympathetically. "If you want, I can officially transfer the title of the house to you. You can do what you need to do." The offer was a lifeline. "Yes, please. I think it's time I made some changes." The next few days were a whirlwind. I worked with Uncle Louis to get the paperwork in order. The title was officially transferred to me, giving me the authority to make decisions about the property. As I signed the final documents, I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The house was now officially mine, but the true test was yet to come. The confrontation with my family was far from over, and I knew it would be a challenge to stand up to their demands and hold my ground. The tension in the house was palpable. Every corner seemed to echo with unspoken resentment. Isabel's complaints had become a daily ritual, and my parents weren't any better. It felt like my home was being suffocated by their anger and demands. The day after I finalized the house transfer, I decided it was time to let my family know what was happening. I gathered them in the living room, feeling a mix of nervousness and resolve. Luna, my loyal Persian cat, sat beside me, sensing the change in atmosphere. "Everyone, I need to talk to you," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've had enough of the way things have been going. I've contacted Uncle Louis, and the house is now officially mine." Marta's face turned pale. "What are you saying, Catalina?" "I'm saying that I've decided to sell the house," I said firmly. "I can't continue living like this. I've endured enough disrespect and unfair treatment." Isabel's eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious. This is our home, too." "Yes, but it's my home," I countered, "and I'm not going to stay here under these conditions. You've all made it clear that you don't want Luna here, and you've disrespected my space and my life choices. I can't stay in this environment anymore." One's face turned red with anger. "You're being unreasonable. This is a drastic step." "It's not drastic. It's necessary," I replied. "I've tried to be understanding, but you've all pushed me too far. I'm not going to be a doormat in my own home." The room fell silent. My parents and Isabel exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. They had expected me to back down, but I was resolute. "I'm giving you 2 weeks to find alternative arrangements," I said, feeling a pang of guilt but standing firm. "After that, I'll put the house on the market." Marta's voice trembled. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my responsibility," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "You've made it clear that you don't want me here, and now it's time for me to act on that." As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house grew even more strained. My family's panic set in as they scrambled to find a place to live. The arguments became more frequent, and their attempts to appeal to my sense of guilt grew desperate. Isabel tried to reason with me, but I remained unmoved. One evening, she approached me with a look of defeat. "Catalina, please, I know we've had our differences, but this is really hard for us. Can't you reconsider?" I shook my head. "Isabel, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about standing up for myself. You and Mom and Dad have treated me poorly for too long, and now it's time for me to reclaim my life." As the deadline approached, I made the final preparations to list the house. I contacted a real estate agent and started getting everything ready for the sale. The process was stressful, but it also brought a sense of liberation. I was finally taking control of my own future. The day before the house was set to go on the market, I held a final meeting with my family. The tension was thick as we sat in the living room, the last remnants of our shared life together. "This is the final notice," I said, my voice steady. "Tomorrow, the house will officially be listed for sale. I'm leaving with Luna, and you need to be out by then." Isabel and my parents looked at each other, their faces a mix of anger and resignation. They knew they had pushed me to this point, but it was clear that the reality of their situation was sinking in. "I hope you understand why I had to do this," I said, feeling a wave of sadness. "I wish things could have been different, but this is what needed to happen." As I packed up my things and prepared to leave, A part of me felt a pang of regret, but the overwhelming need to protect my own well-being outweighed the sadness. The house that had once been my refuge was now a symbol of conflict and hurt. The next morning, I left the house with Luna by my side. The street outside seemed brighter, and the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I was moving on to a new chapter in my life, one where I could finally find peace and rebuild my sense of self. After leaving the house, the world felt different. The weight of family expectations and resentment was finally off my shoulders. I arrived at my new apartment in Seville, a cozy, pet-friendly place with a welcoming atmosphere. Luna seemed to sense the change, too, her content purring filling the quiet space. I spent the first few days unpacking and setting up my new house. The apartment was small, but filled with light, and it quickly began to feel like a sanctuary. Luna adjusted to her new surroundings with ease, choosing her favorite locations and cuddling up in the sunniest nooks. Despite the initial comfort, there was still a part of me that was worried by the ramifications of my decision. I worried about my parents and Isabel, wondering if they had managed to locate a new home to live. I had broken off all contact, not out of malice, but because I needed to preserve my own mental health. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk around my new neighborhood. As I went through the bustling streets of Seville, I felt a sense of rejuvenation. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the sounds of a lively metropolis. For the first time in a long while, I had a genuine sensation of liberation. A few days later, I received a letter from my former house, delivered by a mutual acquaintance. It was from Isabel. Her letter was packed with a mixture of rage and despair. She wrote about the challenges they had faced in locating a new place and the pressure it had caused on our family. There was a tone of regret, and she stated her desire that we may someday reconcile. Reading the message, I felt a pang of empathy. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore the reality that family relationships were still there, even if strained. However, I realized that reconciliation would need to occur with time and hopefully some understanding from both sides. For now, I wanted to focus on rebuilding my own life and finding my own way. As weeks turned into months, I settled into my new schedule. My business as an online marketing professional continued to prosper, and Luna remained a reassuring presence in my life. The flat, once a sign of change and difficulty, became a sanctuary of calm and happiness. I gained new acquaintances in the city and began to explore Seville's rich culture and history. My life was beginning to thrive in ways I hadn't envisaged. I also started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding satisfaction in helping other creatures and their owners. Reflecting on the road, I understood that my decision to take charge of my life was the right one. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about recovering my sense of self and finding a way to live genuinely. The event had taught me the value of sticking up for oneself and creating boundaries, especially with individuals we care about. As I watched Luna frolic in the sun, I felt a great sense of satisfaction. My life was no longer characterized by the fights and contempt of the past. I had emerged stronger and more self-aware, ready to embrace whatever the future brought. Catalina's story, defined by conflict and resolve, underlined the intricacies of familial connections and the value of self-respect. The trip from unrest to empowerment was not simple, but it led to a fresh beginning where peace and personal growth were finally within grasp.